the person.
All right, we'll call the October 12, 2023 Revenue Estimating Conference to order. First thing to do is approve the agenda. So unless there's objection, I'll just declare those approved. So those are approved, and then approve the minutes from the March 2023 meeting. Any corrections, additions, deletions? All right, unless there's objection, I'll declare those approved. Those are both approved by unanimous consent. The next thing, just some thoughts from the members, and we will start with Director Lyons. Acton, excuse me.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Acton. I am the Director of the Fiscal Services Division. I'll start with my comments this morning. 2 weeks ago, the books closed for FY 2023. Net general fund revenue for the year increased $41.9 million compared to FY 2022 and exceeded the March REC estimate by $94.9 million. Sales and use tax revenue came in $83.4 million, or 2.2% higher in FY 2023 than in FY 2022. Whereas individual income tax decreased by $180.8 million, or 3.1% compared to FY 2022. This decrease is primarily due to tax year 2023 income tax rate reductions that began on January 1, 2023, which reduced the top rate from 8.53% to 6%. Throughout this past year, the U.S. economy has continued to remain remarkably resilient, despite elevated inflation, higher interest rates, and higher food and fuel prices. The biggest driver to the economy's strong performance has been consumer discretionary spending. Consumer spending accounts for approximately 70% of the U.S. economy. Real and nominal consumer spending has remained strong, and retail e-commerce sales are reporting the highest growth since the onset of the pandemic in 2020. The Federal Reserve has indicated that interest rates may have to stay higher for longer as inflationary prices remain elevated. However, inflation has started to moderate since peaking at 9.1% in June of 2022. According to the U.S. Labor Department, the annual inflation rate for the United States was 3.7% as of August 2023, which is down from 8.3% a year ago. The September report released this morning reported inflation holding at 3.7%, and core inflation down from 4.3% in August to 4.1% in September. The labor market is starting to show signs of slowing, but continues to be strong. Businesses and companies have continued to remain confident by adding workers at higher pay in an effort to get back to pre-pandemic levels. The most recent federal monthly jobs report for September showed the U.S. economy added 336,000 jobs, and the national unemployment rate was 3.8%. This was an increase from the August jobs number of 227,000, but below the peak of 472,000 jobs in January 2023. Currently, the U.S. labor participation rate is 62.8%. In Iowa, non-farm employment peaked in April 2023 at 1.6 million jobs. Through August 2023, employment was down 8,600 jobs from the peak. Currently, Iowa's unemployment rate is 2.9%, and the labor force participation rate is 68.7%. As has been noted before, a continuing issue for Iowa is more jobs than workers and an aging workforce. In regards to the Iowa ag economy, drought conditions have persisted over much of Iowa this year, with the majority of the state experiencing a severe to extreme drought. Harvest has begun for both corn and soybeans. Crop yields are anticipated to vary across the state due to the drier weather conditions, But for now, the farm economy appears strong despite lower livestock and commodity prices and higher production costs. There are still an increasing number of economic uncertainties facing the US and world economies, which continues to make it a very challenging time to predict economic activity. Elevated consumer price inflation remains a concern, and whether or not the Federal Reserve can pull off a soft landing, shifting the economy from growth to slowed growth and to avoid a recession, as well as uncertainty over increased oil prices, higher fixed mortgage rates, and resuming student loan payments. Internationally, strained government relations between the US and China and volatility in the Middle East and the ongoing Russia and Ukraine war continue to contribute to global economic turmoil. Despite all this, Iowa continues to be in a solid financial position with full budget reserve funds. Turning to the LSA estimate, it needs to be noted that the major tax reductions began in January 2023 and will continue to slow the accumulation of general fund revenue. A further income tax decrease will occur on January 1, 2024, reducing the individual income tax rate from 6% to 5.7%, while the corporate income tax rate will be lowered from 8.4% to 7.1%. These changes and others are included in the LSA estimates. The result is an LSA estimate for FY24 that is essentially flat, and for FY25, the LSA estimate is a modest net revenue decrease.
Thank you. Mr. Underwood.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good summary of where we're at. Trying to think back to our last meeting in March and what's really changed since then. And unfortunately, not a lot. We got rid of some of the problems and issues that we were dealing with that had uncertainty associated with it. And we've picked up a few more since then. Even though some of the other ones seem to be taken care of a little bit, with the Fed finally saying, well, maybe we don't have to raise rates again at this point because the economy is taking care of raising those rates without us having to do anything. But the threat is still there that cash is going to be tight for many of the businesses that have been growing and spending money on capital expenditures. Just heard a presentation on Monday from North Iowa Manufacturing Company. They'd love to hire more people, but they're still struggling. They said what's really scary is we just kind of took a look at the age of our current workforce, and we realized that in the next 3 years, we're going to have to hire about 20% of the people back again just because of retirements. And you know, that's going to be a real challenge for them, let alone trying to grow. So what are you going to do to take care of that? And he says, there's only one thing we can do is automate. So we're putting our money in capital expenditures and realizing that we probably just won't be able to hire just the replacement workers for our retirements that we need. And trying to convince some of these people to hang on for another year or two, which it appears relative to the REC, we haven't been able to hold on to our staff for the REC. It keeps churning over here. So that's the same kind of issue. And I'm sure state government has got that issue, is how do you find replacement people for all the people that are going to be retiring in the next few years. So those are the kinds of things that I see as uncertainty continuing, at least in Iowa. It's great that we've got lower income tax rates. And basically, the estimates that I've seen here for the October estimate seem to be pretty reasonable and not too far apart, but we just have a little bit of discussion to get to a comfortable number, but it's not going to be uncomfortable getting there. No.
All right, thank you. So I just have a couple thoughts. Well, pretty much that covers most things. But first of all, thank you to the governor for the opportunity to represent the executive branch on the Revenue Estimating Conference. The work we do is essential to ensuring the governor and the General Assembly have accurate revenue information to wisely and thoughtfully make decisions regarding necessary revenue and budgetary decisions. As always, I extend a thank you to the committee members for their thoughtful participation and all the people who helped the members prepare for these deliberations, including the Department of Management, Department of Revenue, and the Legislative Services Agency. As previously mentioned, we closed the books on fiscal year 23 recently, and the state finished roughly $95 million above the March estimate, roughly 1% to the positive. This was good news. The state is showing a modest slowdown in revenue. However, those reductions are planned and being driven by the tax rate reductions for Iowa taxpayers. The economy in Iowa continues to grow, although not at the same rate as seen at the end of the pandemic. Corporate tax collections continue to grow even with the enacted rate reductions. The state continues to see growth in sales and use receipts. Employment continues to be strong with some uptick in labor participation. 1 year ago, we discussed the slower economy for fiscal year 24, and that appears to be the case. And in fact, there continues to be much conversation about a downturn, but the economy just keeps plugging along. And in fact, for the first quarter of 2023, real GDP growth for Iowa was 5.2%. We're clearly not in an economic contraction situation, predominantly buoyed by consumer spending. I do have some concerns about the ultimate impact of the Fed's interest rate hikes, primarily when will it be broadly felt, how long will they last, and how severe will the effects be? Not particularly novel questions, but there are no certain answers. Interestingly, and relative to today's business, as previously mentioned, the executive branch and legislative branch total net receipts recommendations lines are once again very close. My thoughts on that are that probably it's easy to split the number for 24 and maybe use LSA's numbers for the second. But as typically fashion, I'll go to you, Mr. Underwood, to make the initial motion and whatever your thoughts are. In conclusion, the state of Iowa continues to be on very solid financial footing, and I see no reason to expect that to change for the foreseeable future. And with that, we'll move to the business. So thank you. And we'll, as I mentioned, we'll start by going to Mr. Underwood.
I would say that your preference to split the difference would be just fine as far as I can see this. Most likely candidate for splitting on is the personal income tax line where the greatest difference exists. If we take $70 million and reduce the LSA fiscal year 24 by 70 million, would be my motion.
Thank you. So the motion is looking at the LSA line to reduce the personal income tax number by $70 million. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 The motion is adopted. And I assume, Joel, Eric, you got that? Okay. Then moving to the fiscal year 25 general fund estimates, accruals, refunds, school infrastructure transfer, and lottery and other transfers. Mr. Underwood.
I guess at this point, I would just move the LSA number for fiscal year 25 without any adjustment.
Motion is to adopt the LSA numbers for fiscal year 25. Second?
I'll second.
A second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And motion approved. Next thing on the agenda. Yes, sir.
Question. With that change for the fiscal year 24 estimate, what is the percentage?
Have you guys calculated that yet?
Yes.
That brings LSA's estimate down to 9752.8, and that's a negative 0.9%.
And then how does that impact 25?
There was a motion to keep 25 as is.
No, but doesn't the relative number?
The relative number, if we reduce the personal income tax number for 25 by 70. Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
Keeping 25. It's a negative 0.18%.
Thank you. You said negative 1.
Negative 1.8%.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
All right, next item on the agenda is the 24 and 25 gambling revenues transferred to other funds and interest earned on reserve funds. Mr. Underwood.
Yes, since we all agree on those numbers, move the numbers as presented.
Second.
I'll second that.
Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion is adopted. Any other business to come before the conference? Seeing none, thank you, and we are adjourned.